Hello everyone, I am Prince Sarong Pangandaman and I will be reporting this research. The title of this research is Motivation in Second Learners Among Learners in Malaysia, authored by Alice Soraya Azar and Darshini Tanggaraju. This research aims to find out the ESL or English as secondary language of the students in Malaysia, especially the college ones. So although English is used as a second language in Malaysia, it is still can't be denied that the learners face difficulties learning this language, even though they make quite an effort for it. It is because Malaysia does not fully highlight the use of it in the country, especially in the schools. That is why to identify the factors behind this issue, Adwani and Shrivastava analyzed the factors affecting the second language acquisition of the respondents. The factors means the motivation that was being used by learners why they still continue and strive to learn English. These authors believe that motivation is the neglected heart of language teaching. It is the combination of effort plus the hunger to achieve the goal of language learning with good attitudes towards the language learning. Which means that in order for the learners to continue learning or have the passion to be proficient in the target language, which is English, the learner should have motivation to continue. Students' motivation can either positively or negatively impact on learning English, so it is up to the teacher what she will do to positively express the passion of a child so as to not create an anxiety, which is a barrier to learning a language. The result of their motivation will tell if the learning is a success or a fail. There are many methods in learning English, however, as observed from the Malaysian students, they have a hard time on fully grasping the language even on their university level ones. Which is why this study will be focusing on finding out the types and level of motivation the Malaysian BTESL students have. By discovering their level of motivation, the researchers will naturally know the effects of motivation on their learning, because that will serve as a basis on why the students was high on this assessment and why the student too was low on this particular activity. So these are the research questions. First, which type of motivation among Malaysian BTESL students use in learning English as a second language? As for the second, what is the level of motivation among Malaysian BTESL students who learn English as a second language? These questions will be answered later after the findings, so let's continue to the next slide, which is the theory used. So in this study, the theory that the researchers used was Robert Gardner's theory of motivation, DC and Ryan's theory of self-determination, and Ellis' theory on resultative motivation. Gardner's theory of motivation was divided into two, which is the integrative and instrumental motivation. Integrative motivation is a concept in the field of language learning and second language acquisition. It refers to the learner's desire to learn a language in order to become part of a particular social or cultural group to identify with its members. In other words, individuals with high integrative motivation are motivated to learn a language not just for the utilitarian purpose of communication, but also because they have a genuine interest in appreciation for the culture associated with the language. This type of motivation is often associated with positive attitudes towards the target language community and a desire to integrate into that community. Like for example is going to London. You have the desire to learn the language being used there so that you will be able to communicate and integrate with the community and there. Another type is instrumental motivation. This refers to the desire to learn a language for practical or utilitarian purposes rather than for a deep interest in the associated culture or community. Individuals with high instrumental motivation are motivated by the tangible benefits that come from acquiring a particular language. This could include career opportunities, academic requirements, passing exams, or other practical advantages. An example of this is learning the English language because you are applying for a job that requires you to speak English, like for example, tourism management. So the desire to learn English there was the fact that you were required to do it because of the job opportunities that it has and the benefits that it has for you. Another theory that was used in this research is the self-motivation theory of DC and Ryan, particularly the intrinsic motivation. This refers to engaging in an activity for the inherent satisfaction and enjoyment derived from the activity itself. It involves doing something because it is inherently interesting, fulfilling, or personally meaningful. Individuals who are intrinsically motivated are driven by their own internal desires, curiosity, or passion for the activity. It is often associated with sustained engagement, creativity, and a deep sense of satisfaction. For example, a student getting top scores in class. If that particular student was intrinsically motivated, then she will strive for getting top scores because she is personally satisfied by that fact. She feels fulfilling by being the top student in class. That is what intrinsic motivation means. There is also another motivation under this self-determination theory, which is the extrinsic motivation. This is the complete opposite of intrinsic because in this one, an individual is motivated by the fact that there is an external forces. The external forces can either be negative or have positive impact. If positive, the one that motivates that individual is the reward that he or she will be getting. If it is negative, then the one that keeps that individual going is the fact that if he or she don't, he will be punished by the external forces. However, this was not mentioned in this study, and instead there is resultative motivation of Ellis. The last theory that was included in this research is the resultative motivation by Ellis. It is concerned with the relationship between motivation and achievement. In this theory, it states that the students are more likely to be active in the class because of the achievement that they might get afterwards. So it is basically the same with the extrinsic motivation. So this resultative motivation is quite the same with the extrinsic, with how a resultative motivated person is looking forward to the results, meaning there is an achievement afterwards. An example is when a student who does her best on finishing her activities because her mother promised her of buying her a makeup kit, for instance. So that makeup kit is the achievement that she will be getting, which is the resultative motivation. So the author used these theories because it aligned with their objectives, which is to find out the kind of motivation the students have in terms of acquiring English as a second language. This is to find out which is more applicable and effective motivation that keeps the students on learning the English despite the difficulties being faced by it. Many different studies looked into this kind of topic too, which showed varied results. Some say that the lackings of motivation was due to the school's environment and their facilities. Some says the students just have integrative motivation, and many says that it was because of the instrumental motivation that they have, which was explained before, that this kind of motivation is getting practical job opportunities. A particular study was from SIFA, who researched learners' perspectives of the challenges faced in learning English as a second language in Sri Lanka. Her samples were from secondary schools, including 45 boys, 55 girls, and 10 English teachers. According to the quantitative and qualitative data that she had gathered, the negative reasons was the lack of English exposure outside the classroom, the lack of facilities, and poor economy led to external challenges, while the anxiety, motivation, and attitudes fall under the internal challenges. So additionally, the teacher's wrong way of teaching the learning materials also posed as a problem and a challenge. These discovered issues were of course quite hard to solve, especially when the government is lacking of providing these matters. The only thing that we as a future teacher can change is the internal challenges and the way of teaching. By solving that problem, the challenges will ease for a bit. The method in conducting this research is using quantitative method to find the accurate data, and because it employs interpretation of statistics and mathematical counts. The researchers chose 150 second-year BTSL students at a private university in Selangor, Malaysia, using purposive sampling. When we say purposive sampling, it is a form of non-probability sampling in which researchers rely on their judgment when choosing members of the population to participate in their surveys. Emphasis was on total population sampling, involving an examination of the entire population to gather feedback on motivational factors and experiences. As for how the authors collected the data, it is through a modified questionnaire from Gardner and Lambert's Attitude Motivation Test Battery. Attitude Motivation Test battery is a research instrument which has been developed to assess major affective components shown to be involved in second language learning. One example of this is that it determines or measures the intensity of a student's motivation to learn a language, and a tool with the aim of analyzing linguistic and non-linguistic goals that people try to accomplish by learning the second language. The reliability test involved obtaining a Cronbach alpha coefficient of 0.926. The questionnaire link was distributed through the app called WhatsApp, and the gathered online questionnaire data was subsequently examined using SPSS version 23. The quantitative data obtained from the questionnaire was analyzed in terms of percentages, and the findings were visually presented through tables and figures. So when we say SPSS version 23, it is a statistical software suite that is for data management, multivariate analysis, and other statistical methods. So the next one is the findings. So as you can observe, the columns are not any different from one another, especially the integrative and the instrumental motivation, which is only slightly different from each other. For the integrative motivation, it got a total score of 2,326. Instrumental motivation is the highest, which consists of 3,769. For resultative motivation, it got 1,635, and for the last one, intrinsic motivation, it got 1,681. However, we can say that majority of the Malaysian students have instrumental reasons on pursuing English language proficiency because of the results. Most of them has this mentality, I have to be knowledgeable in English just to pass the exam or get a better job in the future. So to identify the BPSL students' motivation level, an average score for all respondents was calculated by means of SPSS. Then an overall mean score for the respective four types of motivation was estimated to identify the range among them. This figure shows the calculated mean scores for all four types of motivation: the instrumental, integrative, resultative, and intrinsic. Integrative motivation got a total mean of 3.88, 4.19 for instrumental, which is the highest, 3.63 for resultative motivation, which is the lowest, and 3.74 for their intrinsic motivation. The results showed that instrumental motivation has relatively higher mean scores, which is the 4.19, compared to other three types of motivation. It is also apparent that all four types of motivation are at the high motivational level. However, they cannot compare to the instrumental motivation of the respondents. It is very notable that the results are not different from one another because the instrumental motivation of the respondents is not really different from the integrative, which is it only surpassed the integrative one by 0.31. So to conclude, the overall mean scores also reveal that the BTESL students have high instrumental motivation towards learning English as a second language. This study aimed to determine the primary source of motivation among BTESL students for learning English as a second language, focusing on four types, which is the integrative motivation, instrumental motivation, resultative, and intrinsic motivation. The results indicate that the Malaysian students place a greater emphasis on instrumental motivation, driven by practical factors such as necessity of English for employment and academic considerations such as passing the exam or graduating from the college. So in conclusion, motivation is a dominant factor in acquiring a new language. So just like what I have said before, for the students to have the heart of learning the English with passion and with their heart, their motivation must be developed well. In this research, it shows that the Malaysian BTSL students have instrumental motivation, which is only driven by the motivation of getting practical opportunities. However, it is also notable that the integrative motivation is just slightly different from the instrumental. So which means that many Malaysian students also have the motivation of learning English to integrate within the community of the English country speakers. So since the topic is motivation, it is a crucial role for the teachers, for us future teachers, to understand this topic properly, because the teachers will be the guidance of the students in setting a goal and achieving that particular goal. You have to be the role model to express what the motivation have on that particular student. This gives us an idea that maybe in the future the students will probably be using English language as a day-to-day use towards one another because of its terrifyingly fast spread of the language and its dominance around the world, especially because of the globalization. The students will continue on using the language, English language, because it visibly shows that the many opportunities nationally or internationally. Kumbaga, you already have a secured position if you are fluent in the language, especially with the advancement of the world and technology which uses English as the standard language of all, where everyone can. So at the end of this study, the authors gave recommendations that will be useful to the readers, especially the teachers. The first one is lecturers should always design a class environment that promotes students' motivation for learning ESL, or English as secondary language. We have discussed earlier that the loss of motivation of the learners was due to the fact that the environment was really mess, or it distracts them. That's why it is recommended that a teacher must properly and beautify the classroom in order for the learners to not have any interference or distractions. For example, for that is for the classroom to have no barriers like a destroyed wall, not usable black or white board and all. So to be able to teach without distraction, the lecturers must eliminate this interference. So the second recommendation is that students should be given opportunities to visit other countries in a program called Global Learning Programs, or GLP. So this one, it is for the exposure. It is not enough to only listen to the language. A learner must be able to apply it too, which is why they need an environment that will make them do so, that will make them interact using the target language that they are learning. For example, is letting them go to English-speaking countries, or if not possible due to the financial factors, go to the cities that the country has which is highly developed, where using English language is common and not shocking. This will serve as a good training ground for the learners on practicing their speaking and understanding skills because they will be forced to do so. The last one is conducting a new study on the impact of parental encouragement on second language learners' motivation towards a target language. This means that many researchers should also have a look in this topic because it is crucial. Teaching is the most crucial part of the community because it will serve as their input, as the knowledge that they will be gaining for the rest of their lives, which is why this study recommends studying on the parental behavior that affects and influences their children to have more positive motivation on learning the English language. So as this study mainly focuses on students, teachers, and lecturers, it is essential to identify parents' involvement in encouraging the L2 learners, since they are the primary motivation that the students had embraced. By their influence, it might be able to increase the learner's positive impact or view on English language. As for my own recommendations, aside from the recommendations given by the two authors, I thoroughly recommend the teacher's way of teaching to not be too harsh in teaching the language. Like some of the research that mandated the English only language, which has a punishment if you speak your mother tongue. So for me, it is not really effective to use that kind of method, that harsh way of teaching, because it only results to the children having an anxiety or trauma on speaking that target language again, which is English. So I recommend that the teachers should observe the different motivation that the students have in order to apply the exact feedback that will make the students actively participate within the classroom. Since we all know that the students in one classroom have different individual differences that they have in order to actively participate in one classroom. So for the teachers to, so the role of the teacher is to figure out individual differences or the kind of motivation that the student have, so that you will be able to get get her or him to participate in your activities. Another suggestion is managing the classroom or school attitudes. Since we all know that the classmates are the people around the learner, like the family, peers, teachers, and community, has a major effect on the learner's self-esteem. I think to be able to manage the attitudes around the class will make less anxiety for the learner to speak his or her mind. He or she will not be scared or embarrassed to express opinions using the English language because no one will laugh at him about it.